Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something truly fascinating. We're going to explore how architecture goes way beyond just, walls and roofs. We're looking at how it actively dictates human behavior, grabs our attention, and even shapes our belief systems. We are going to unpack the powerful, hidden mechanisms behind the world's religious spaces.
But before we start naming specific religions, we have to step back and ask how any space transforms from just a regular room into a sacred one. Think about it for a second. How does a building actively organize where we look, how we sit, what we smell, or even what we are allowed to touch? Well, let's dive right in and look at our roadmap for today.
Here is the agenda. We'll start with what makes spaces sacred, move into the center of attention, explore body, sound, and community, tackle conflicts and security, and finally wrap up with respect in pluralistic societies.
Section 1, what makes spaces sacred? The foundations of sacred space.
Okay, so the very first mechanism of a sacred space is this concept of threshold creation. We're talking about physical doors, courtyards, or even just shoe removal zones. And these aren't just architectural features. They physically and mentally force you to leave everyday logic behind. When you take off your shoes or walk through a massive set of ornate doors, you are literally crossing from your normal, mundane space into a completely different set of rules. It's like hitting a mental reset button.
Section 2, the center of attention. Focusing the mind.
Take the Islamic faith, for example. The space is physically oriented by the mihrab. This is a very specific niche in the wall that indicates the Qibla, which is the direction of Mecca. It anchors the communal body movements, the bowing, and the prostrating. The architecture literally tells the entire community exactly where to focus their physical energy and spiritual attention, all at the exact same time.
Now, contrast this with a Jewish synagogue, which centers its space around the bima and the Torah shrine. Instead of pointing you in a specific direction for physical prostration, the space serves as a focal point for reading, learning, and historical memory. The architecture here elevates the text, the Torah itself, making the act of communal listening and studying the absolute, undisputed center of the room. Moving over to a Hindu temple, the architectural climax is the Garbhagriha. This is the innermost, deeply protected sanctuary that houses the main deity image, or murti. It's designed specifically for darshan. And darshan is this incredibly intimate, ritual act of seeing and being seen by the divine presence. So the entire temple is purposefully built to guide you from the loud, bright outside world into this heavily concentrated, intense point of visual and spiritual connection. Meanwhile, in a Sikh Gurdwara, the absolute center of attention isn't an altar or a statue at all. It's a living book. The Guru Granth Sahib, the holy scripture of Sikhism, is treated with the utmost respect as the living guru and placed right on an elevated platform. You enter, you bow to the scripture, and you sit on the floor. It's a spatial arrangement that instantly communicates the core Sikh value of total equality. This is a brilliant illustration of how different centers demand completely different behaviors. On one side, you have the silent, highly individual meditation and clockwise walking at a Buddhist stupa, and then contrast that with the loud, egalitarian, and super active community service of a Sikh langar on the other side, where everyone sits together to eat a shared meal. The architecture is literally telling you whether to look inward in complete silence or outward in bustling community service. Section 3, Body, Sound, and Community. Physical connections.
This space you're in actually dictates your communal movement. It tells your body what to do to belong to that group. Whether that means standing shoulder to shoulder in perfectly equal rows for Islamic prayer, walking clockwise in a ritual around a Hindu shrine or Buddhist stupa, or performing seva, which is selfless service, by sitting on the floor to eat together in a Sikh Gurdwara. These physical actions are exactly what binds the community together.
But hey, it's not just about moving around. These spaces are expertly engineering our senses, too. They use the rich smell of incense, the specific angling of light pouring through stained glass windows, or the massive resonant sound of kirtan chanting and church organs. The whole shebang is designed to create a deeply kinesthetic, full-body experience that leaves the everyday world far, far behind.
Section 4, Conflicts and Security. Real-world pressures. Of course, none of this exists in a bubble. Today, these buildings face immense societal pressures and act as major flashpoints for modern negotiations. You've got demographic shifts, where shrinking congregations just can't afford the upkeep of massive historic buildings anymore.
You have noise complaints from changing urban neighborhoods, and many struggle with this constant tug of war between functioning as a living place of worship and managing relentless streams of daily tourists.
And then there's the very real, very pressing issue of safety. The Pew Research Center actually tracks this, and religious spaces worldwide are frequently impacted by social hostilities and state restrictions across 198 countries. That proves that access to and the protection of these sites is a highly sensitive global issue. These aren't just old buildings, right? They are very often targets and they're sanctuaries.
On top of that, organizations like the UNESCO World Heritage Center highlight the deep tension of heritage preservation. Just imagine trying to run your weekly community gathering, but your building is also a protected global monument. It requires this incredibly delicate balance between preserving historical and ecological significance while still allowing a community to actually use and adapt the space for their living faith.
So this leads to a really profound, honestly kind of heartbreaking modern dilemma, particularly for minority spaces like synagogues. They have to constantly balance this deep, intrinsic desire to be spiritually welcoming and open to the public with the strict, absolute necessity of physical security to protect their community from anti-Semitic threats. It's a really tough architectural negotiation between keeping the doors open and keeping the gates secure.
Section 5. Respect in pluralistic societies. Navigating pluralism.
So how do we navigate this? Well, entering a sacred space requires a very specific visitor ethic. You are not walking into a neutral museum. You are stepping into someone's living, breathing community center. The steps are pretty simple, but they are absolutely vital. First, research the specific rules before you go. Second, adapt your clothing or remove your shoes if that's required. And third, deeply respect the boundaries of the space, especially when it comes to taking photos or touching sacred objects.
At the end of the day, the ultimate goal here is to understand before you judge. Observing these spaces respectfully lets us step completely outside our own worldview. It gives us a physical, tangible way to understand what a completely different community truly values, how they structure their lives, and what they consider sacred, all without passing immediate judgment. So, I want to leave you with this final thought. What religious space in your own city are you going to see with new eyes? The next time you walk past a local place of worship, a church, a mosque, a temple, or a synagogue, don't just look at the bricks. Ask yourself how its architecture is quietly shaping the community inside. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep observing the world around you.